Hi, I'm Sid Brandy, co-founder and CEO of GitLab. I'm here with Hassan and Alistair of infracost.io, and we're going to discuss monetizing open source. How do you start making money with your open source project? Hassan, thanks for this call.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the call. So I'm Hassan. I am one of the co-founders of Infracost. I look after the business side. Maybe I'll let Ali and Alistair introduce themselves real quickly as well.
Sure. I'm Ali, co-founder as well. I've been working in cloud costs for about 10 years. And I'm also Hassan's brother.
And I'm Alistair, the other co-founder, and some people call me the third brother as well.
Perfect. Okay, so let me give a quick intro to what Infracost is. So Infracost essentially creates a cloud cost estimate for Terraform and pull requests or merge requests. So developers know how much the cloud resources they're about to consume cost before they launch them. And it does that by leaving a comment in the pull request and says, hey, this change to the Terraform file will increase your bill by 25% next month. So that's more or less what Infracost does right now. And then some quick relevant information might also be that it's there's a CLI component that reads the Terraform file, and then there's a hosted pricing service that is the API. So we run a managed version of that, which keeps all the live prices. The users are mainly DevOps people, and the buyers are DevOps managers and so on. Ali, Alistair, any more context to provide on top of that? And then we've got our question.
No, I think that's a great start.
Perfect. So with that in mind, we're B2B enterprise. The bigger the bill, the more useful this thing is. Our question is mainly around what's the balance between becoming an industry standard tool and when to focus on the enterprise and start the monetization of a company like ours?
Yeah, I think it's a super tough, super important question. In general, like if you're, it's very hard. It depends, like what can you afford? Like as soon as you start raising money, you will have to start monetizing. So sometimes you can delay raising money for a long time. That's maybe because you're incubated somewhere. Like I think, for example, you're based on Terraform at HashiCorp. Or for example, at GitLab, we bootstrapped for a long time. And that allowed us to delay things. I'm not even sure in hindsight whether that led to a more or less successful outcome, but it is great to be able to focus on that. I think much more important is not so much when, but what. What features are you going to monetize? And what you want to make sure of is that the open source adoption continues. And that is mainly coming from individual contributors who like have a problem, download your software and solve it. So don't monetize the individual contributors. Monetize the people who control the budgets. So at GitLab, we have our free tier, which is open source, and then two paid tiers, Premium and Ultimate. And Premium is is aimed at directors, features they care about, like stability and scale and control. And features that executives are like company-wide dashboards, like getting an overview, getting the helicopter view of the company. And that way we monetize features that the person who just has a problem, and in your case, it would be like, hey, last month I really blew up our cloud bill and I don't want to repeat that. As long as you don't monetize anything they care about, they only care about their project, their things, seeing it in merge request. They don't care about like industry trends, about a company-wide overview, about like people who are repeatedly driving a ton of costs or potential to reduce costs or stuff like that. They care less about that. They just don't want to get in trouble. So I think that is the most essential thing. And we call that our buyer-based open core model. Open core means open source and paid versions. And then buyer-based, who cares most about it? And if it's a typical buyer, you price for it. And if it's a typical not buyer, like someone who'd use the software but wouldn't pay for it, you put it in the open source version.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That makes sense. So it's interesting because we've had now a couple of calls with investors or a couple of chats, and the investors are also telling us don't monetize yet. So I think they're kind of seeing, okay, push that front as well. So it seems like defining what to monetize first, building some sort of value prop, and then going after the monetization, testing out different business models and pricing models and things like that.
Yeah, I think that it's super helpful to get to a certain scale. And to get to a certain trust, like, hey, this is a really good project. Like, imagine if you're building features that are like basic building blocks to use it, they all fall in the IC category. So you can say, oh, we're going to start monetizing, but you're not adding any of these company-wide dashboards or industry trends. I assume that your project is not doing any of that because you have much more basic things to worry about. So even according to the buyer-based open core model, you shouldn't be monetizing because you're not shipping those features. And then the worst thing you could do is say, well, we need to monetize something. Let's put something that's aimed at ICs in that because people will pay for that. And now you're hurting the growth of your project.
Could a follow-up question be that at what point do you start building those buyer-based features? Because so this open source project has been going on for about 5-6 months, I think, roughly. So it still hasn't fully baked. There's a lot of like edge cases, and especially given that it's workflow software and it's used in GitLab, GitHub Actions, or any CI system you can name. And we've got kind of early on investment, so that allows us to not worry about those high level features. But there's a bit of a risk in which case we haven't shown like who's actually going to pay for this, right? We've had conversations, but we've not validated that whole question. And we're kind of just deferring that.
Yeah, I think when your roadmap starts including features such as role-based access control, auditing, Active Directory and LDAP sign-in and synchronization, SAML sign-in, like that's like, hey, this is starting. Is this the IC asking for that? Probably not, but it's probably the director asking for that. And so it might be time to create that first tier. And you can monetize things that aren't even there yet. I'm a disclosure. I'm an investor in this company. It's open source device management. They have a paid tier, and it has 0 features because RBAC is still coming. But they already have customers who value the support, who love the direction it's going, and are happy to become a customer. So sometimes it helps to give a little bit of visibility, or like, oh, these are features we'll monetize. Also, it sometimes gives a bit of clarity to your user base, like, oh, they're going to monetize that. Yeah, that's all the stuff I don't care about. This is great. I'm with this project. So where before maybe my advice would be like, oh, don't give clarity yet. Now, like, transparency works really well. People are starting to get this model, and maybe give some clarity about, oh, this is the stuff we're not shipping yet, but this is the stuff that's going to be monetized.
I like that a lot. That was a great, that pricing page was actually really good, because we've got big companies that are in our Slack channel right now talking to us on a daily basis. But they're asking us, where are you going to monetize? And we're like, okay, well, wait for it. What do you think?
To maybe give you a list, I think Replicated did a great list of like the typical enterprise features. Single sign-on, audit logs, security, deployment options, team management, GDPR, reporting.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Ali.
Before you maybe we've got to literally just on Friday, because we were getting this question, how are you going to charge money? How are you going to make money? We added a quick FAQ, and the FAQ was along the lines of the public price books from the cloud vendors are free. Anytime you want us to connect to your cloud account to digest your CloudWatch data or custom discounts and custom prices, those will be paid features. Now, the individual contributors would also like those features because they allow them to have more accurate cost estimates. Based on that kind of principle, would you potentially advise against monetizing such features?
Yeah,
because it's not the director.
According to the buyer-based open core model, it's probably not something you should monetize. Now, there's lots of other considerations. You're running a managed service. Maybe you have some cost to actually ingest the data and stuff like that. But just on the basis of it, well, it says don't monetize that. Like accurate stuff. It's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't charge for that. Like fast website, you shouldn't charge for that. Like the product should just work and do its thing. It should be accurate and fast and easy.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so when we come to monetization, what are your thoughts around usage-based pricing and user-based pricing?
That's a great topic. It is super hard, especially in your neck of the woods. We do user-based pricing, works great. People are very used to it. Enterprises kind of think about their cost that we have this many people and then we be this percentage for the office and this percentage for software costs, etc. So it really fits with how they budget, which is super important. In your case, it's like you're saving people money. Wouldn't it be great if you can just get a percentage of the savings? Yes, that would be great, but there's so few companies who actually pull that up and scale and become amazing companies. I've not seen it much. But the nice thing about you is you know exactly how much money they're spending because that's kind of you're ingesting the data. So I think that makes it very interesting. So if I were you, I would look at companies like Zora and how they charge. Zora says, hey, we take care of your subscriptions. And there's a company in YC who's amazing for this. They are called Vendor, and they know exactly how companies charge. So you might hit them up for a favor, say, hey, can you talk us through Zora, their pricing model? The nice thing is if you're in some kind of revenues, if you have insight in cost or income, like you can charge a percentage of that. And that's why Stripe is a major company, and Shopify and Amazon FBA. So that might be very interesting for you. User-based pricing for you might make less sense because you're going to have, well, the question is this going to be a few people who use the product very intensely and like save millions of dollars and just a few users? Then it doesn't make sense. Is it something that every developer in the company is going to use? Then that's interesting and it's enough users to sell. What I would be afraid of if I were you is that just the infrastructure team in the company would use it, and that it wouldn't get you there. So intuitively, I'd say go for a percentage, but maybe not structure it like that. Maybe do something like Zora does for pricing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think if in a future state, if serverless becomes the way to do things, and so every line of code written has an implied kind of cloud cost, then maybe you're right, like go towards a user-based. But until then, I think you're spot on with the usage-based. The
one thing we have to be careful of is, and this is from our previous startup, which was in this space, there's a bit of a backlash against cloud cost management companies who charge a percentage of the bill. Because I don't know why, but I think it's because it seems like there's a bit of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like in that case, you want the bill to grow, even though it's your thing to reduce the bill. I can see that, but I think in reality, like, yeah, I think it doesn't matter that much. And the fact that there's a backlash also tells you that it's a popular pricing model.
Yeah, it's pretty much what's used by most of the companies, I think, in this space. Right, Hassan?
Like you could like just a weird idea, but you could say, we're going to charge you for the list price of all the services you consume. And then we're going to help you not just to reduce your consumption, but also to get a better deal and kind of do vendor for cloud services. So we're going to show you like, oh, someone else got a better deal on XYZ. Now, don't do that yet.
That'll be
more
interesting.
complicated and stuff like that. But that would, if you were going to do the negotiation part, if you're going to help with that, it's very important to price on list price and not on the discount, because otherwise you have that perverse incentive problem. So there's that perverse incentive problem. I think it's not big enough to make a dent. And I think to convince customers, you can just say, hey, this is day one of them implementing it, and this is what they were paying day 90, and like we're reducing those costs by 23% for the average customer. So no, we're not increasing cloud bills for people.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate kind of side effect is if all the developers understand cloud costs, they make less waste, more efficient systems.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up on that. We've seen companies who are like CI based workflows, companies like Sneak, Anchor, who are kind of in the CI pipeline, and their sweet spot is once you get into the CI pipeline, one person puts it in, the whole team uses it. So they have these pricing models where they charge per seat, and they base it on the number of members in your Git repo. Because I don't care if you use that on the CLI or CI, I still want to charge for the whole team because you're kind of all getting a bit of a benefit. Is that something you've seen as well for these tools that go into CI?
We do an even more perfect bundle. Like if they're using any aspect of GitLab, every user gets the entire product.
Right.
So we do the same thing, and they're preventing your like infrastructure team problem. Like you have 100 developers, there's 5 people on the infra team because it's cloud-based, there's not much to do, and you have only 5 seats. That would be your failure case.
Makes sense.
They are thinking percentage of people, their wages, and not if you do user-based pricing. If you do user-based pricing, probably do what Sneak does. Say, hey, you got to pay for all your developers, even though maybe only your infra team is looking at the MRs.
Cool.
And then the final kind of question I had is, it could take an entire day to discuss. My questions are usually like that, but when we're talking about licensing or licenses, open source licenses, when it comes to enterprise B2B, what is the advice to a startup starting out?
Yeah, I wouldn't pick any weird licenses like AGPL or stuff like that. There's just a whole bunch of companies who can't use anything with that license. So I would just do MIT or Apache 2. It's the default. You run a risk of people forking your code and competing with you. I hope you're successful enough to be in that situation in the future.
That makes sense. And then when we come to have enterprise features and sellable features, is that the point that you would start to look at multi-licensing or closed source or anything like that?
Well, the paid features should be proprietary. Don't make those open source. That's weird. It's weird to ask people to pay for something that's open source. So just make those under a proprietary license. And what you see at some point is that companies like Elastic and Mongo say at a certain point, the MIT Apache licenses go away, and it comes to SSPL or something like that, an anti-compete license. I don't think it's great for the community around your product, but on the other hand, it might be great for the business itself. And if you're really successful, you're going to have the big cloud vendors taking an interest in your code base and everything else. So I think from a business perspective, you want to put a CLA on there and keep that option open for the company. I think that would be prudent for the business, even though from kind of an open source perspective, I think it's nice for the community to have the guarantee that that's less likely to happen. And for example, we at GitLab have a DCO, developer certificate of origin, would still allow us to relicense it, but lets them keep ownership of their code, which I think is a nice thing.
And do you think a CLA is important right from the start? then
Well, you don't want to ship code to customers that you're not licensed to use.
okay.
And if someone just sends you a PR, that doesn't mean that they're licensing it to you.
Fair.
It's a great answer. Awesome. I think that's all the questions I had. Anything, Ali, Alistair, anything from you guys? Anything more?
Well, the CLA is
Sid?
important, yes, but it doesn't mean that someone has to sign a DocuSign to submit code. You can just have in your contributing file, like, hey, if you send us a PR, you're automatically accepting the CLA or something like that. So
It's kind of like if you click on sign up, you've already agreed to the terms of service.
kind of like that. So no need for the DocuSign, but do have a CLA or a DCO text in your repository.
Perfect. Sid, thank you so much for taking time to have a chat. I think that was super useful for us, actually. We'll keep going and see how it goes.
Can I ask one thing? You talked about this managed service. Are people able to run it on their own infrastructure, like in the public cloud themselves, without using any SaaS service?
Yes, they are. Both components are currently open source under Apache license. So yes, they can.
Cool. I think that's super important. Thanks so much. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.